Good. Got it.
Got it.
All right. Well, it is a really good crowd here, and I'm so glad that you could all join us. As we said in our promotional materials, this is really by popular request. It's because probably many of you who may have been on the program in, I think it was November, wasn't it, Noel and Bill, on recruiting and maintaining volunteers, you raised, you wanted to follow up, and you raised issues of sort of reimagining volunteers and engaging them in a variety of ways. So this is really your program, and we're very grateful to Noel Derman of Arlington Neighborhood Village and Bill Emmett of Mount Pleasant Village to again do their very much appreciated co-facilitation of the session. As you know, this is not a formal presentation. They're not going to show you slides or lecture you. This is really to share your problems, but also share any solutions as they come up, and they'll be guiding the conversation today. So thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Noel and Bill. Take it away.
Well, thank you, Mary Jo. And you said this is not a formal presentation, and I think Noel and I will demonstrate that very shortly here. We've not prepared anything here for this, at least not jointly, so I think we can jump right in. I'll say, and Noel, you're on mute, so whenever you want to jump in, please do. But when we last did the previous session, we in Mount Pleasant were right at the beginning of a pilot phase of our new volunteer program. We kind of reconstituted it and tried to reinvigorate it. And so now we're several months into the pilot. And what I can say is that I think we would say overall it's a success. And I think I can see that some of at least one of our committee members is on here, Larry Rickards, so he can jump in at some point, and I may be missing others because of the screen. But we are encountering problems. We encounter problems that are technical problems, like, is Helpful Village getting word out to people that to volunteers that there are needs in a reliable way? There have been some instances in which we feel as if there's been some slippage somewhere between posting the need for a volunteer to help someone with a task and volunteers seeing it and responding. So there's that sort of technical problem. And there's also the problem of not having enough volunteers in certain areas. So we are finding ourselves with many requests for drivers, and we don't have enough drivers to meet all of those requests necessarily. So I'm sure those are, I see heads nodding. Those are not uncommon problems, but the question is, what are the solutions? So those are just the things that I would throw out there. Noel, what do you have to?
Yeah, sure. I think you're right. Those are definitely common areas. So here, a quick overview at A&V in Arlington. We have about 355 members, and we have over 380 trained embedded volunteers, right? So that's a lot, and it sounds great. And our recruitment and training process is smooth and it's working well. But where we run into some challenges is that we bring these people on and train them, and a lot of them we don't hear from again. So while we have a great service fulfillment rate, it's really credit is given to a core of maybe 150, 200 volunteers that do the work. So a challenge for us is when we bring people on, how do we keep them engaged and volunteering on a regular basis with us? How do we make sure that we're providing opportunities that are rewarding for them so that they want to keep volunteering. We also are interested in finding ways that we can use our volunteer power beyond the direct services. So how can we use volunteers behind the scenes? How can we use volunteers to drive new ideas and programs? So those are really the main areas for us that we need to concentrate on for engagement. It's really getting people involved, getting them feeling connected to the organization so they want to volunteer. And then how can we use them in different ways? Like Bill mentioned, we have a lot of transportation requests and most of them get filled, but sometimes it's really down to the wire, and sometimes it's really depending on the same drivers who will pop up their hands and fill in at the last minute. So how do we spread the request need across our really large volunteer corps so that we're not really stressing the same people over and over again? So I would love to hear from other people. I mean, what has worked for us well in terms of looking for support behind the scenes? We're really lucky that we have a lot of volunteers that do work behind the scenes. We have a committee structure that is really the backbone of the organization and operations. You know, we have a finance, IT, events, fundraising, where our volunteers and members and board members can get together and really, provide professional level services. We've had luck getting people to do those types of things by putting out direct requests for that type of help in our volunteer newsletter. Yeah, Wendy says we have luck if we ask for a very specific task, like we need someone to do an informal audit, or we need someone to design our holiday card. Putting out really specific asks has been helpful. But I would love to hear from others on how do you get people on board? Well, how do you keep people on board? How do you keep them engaged? How do you make them feel part of a community? And then how do you put them to work beyond just direct services?
Well, Anne has her hand raised, I see right off the top here. So let's see, do you have a question or comment, Diane?
Yes, thank you. I do. I wanted very quickly to say that everything you've said is highly relevant. Cheverly Village is very small. We have at present 60 members and a little over 80 volunteers. We've always had more volunteers and members. That's a good thing. What I'd like to say, we also are having a little bit of problems that we haven't quite put our fingers on entirely with regard to Helpful Village sending out or volunteers receiving. We're working with volunteers to make sure it's not in everybody's trash file when they get a request, but that's still a pending issue. I just wanted to mark that. We do have the problem of volunteers not being very active. The COVID pandemic has not helped because a good many of our categories of services haven't been needed or haven't been possible during this time. But even so, sometimes I wonder, is anyone out there? Why is no one responding to this tech help issue, which is very specific and we could perhaps get some help with? Something that we're working on now, and we have a new leader of our volunteer support team who I think will be able to help us energize this idea, but I'd love to know if any of you have done it. And that's to try to create esprit de corps, not just in the whole volunteer group, but or everybody doing direct service volunteering. Oh, by the way, we do involve volunteers quite a lot in the teams, what you call behind the scenes stuff. And that requires hands-on, one-on-one invitations and stuff, but that is very worthwhile. And people do tend to like to work in teams and bring their ideas. But the issue that we're trying to bring to the problem of, the approach we're trying to bring to the issue of the direct services and people not responding is to see if we could pull together esprit de corps in particular types of services. I'd love to get all the tech volunteer together. I don't know, for a social time, or to just, for example, recently I was trying to send all of them a remote viewing tool that they could use, so they could use remote tools in helping some of their folks, their members. I'd love to do that The drivers, we have no problem with. I think they all just instinctively support each other because they know what they're doing, and it's a familiar task. But I'd love to get ideas for how to create esprit de corps, particularly in the various families of volunteers.
So I hope that people are thinking about that and can provide some tips for Diane. Meanwhile, why don't we go ahead and see what's on your mind, Vanessa, and then we can get the conversation flowing further. You're muted, Vanessa.
Sorry about that. I don't at the moment have questions, but I have some reactions and comments on what's been said so far. So first and foremost, regarding what Noelle brought up, which was the idea of how do we onboard people? They've been through training, but we have no idea if they're working, and because of COVID, they've stopped, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I have a very small committee. When I say small, we're only 4 people. And although we've just completed our volunteer survey, which we do every other year, and we're going to get the results this week, actually on Thursday. What the other thing our committee took on was the idea of that. How do we get people back to working, those who stopped during pandemic, new people, how do we find out what's going on? And they have said that they would be willing to make phone calls. And they're going to start by calling the people who've been trained since July of 2021. No, 2021, yes. And then after they go through that group, we're going to go to people who haven't volunteered through the pandemic and et cetera. So it's really just a person-to-person contact. How are you doing, et cetera. So that's the first thing I was thinking about. Emails. Both Bill and Diane spoke about, Helpful Village and not being sure whether or not people are getting the emails. So we use Run My Village. Not Helpful Village. And frankly, when I first started with them, I couldn't figure out how to deal with their email system. We've been working with them now since November 2017. So I actually weekly send out emails to all of my volunteers with all the ride requests, friendly phone call requests, and what's the third one? Like decluttering and that type of stuff. And I do it on Monday to everybody. And then on Friday, I do it targeted to just drivers. I have 4 rides still open. Can anybody accept them? And that does seem to work. The minor problem is, as we all know, who can guarantee whether or not people open emails? So, that's a different problem. But at least I know that it's going out because I'm the one who sent it. And I use Run My Village email system, and there's a way to track that it's gone out, so I know that it's gone out. And then regarding esprit de corps, Diane, I was all set with an answer, and then you sort of changed what you were saying, but that's okay. During the pandemic, since we were doing Zooms for everybody else, this was like back in April 2020, I said, why don't we do something for our volunteers as well? So in the beginning, it was weekly. As of August, and then we went to every other week. And then as of this year, or August 2021, we go to once a month. And we have had a couple that have actually been in person because we could meet outside at a local restaurant, and those are purely social. But each one of the Zoom ones, we actually have topics for. And so like we had one for our drivers, and we had a large crowd that came to that. We had one specifically for friendly visitors. And now we're sort of doing what where she changed her mode was, we're starting to do some of that as well. I'm grouping the volunteers. So through Noel, I've learned about the Home Organizers program that they do there, and we're starting that. We have we partnered with a group in New York called Dorot. We're doing tech coaches, and they get together every so often, or either via Zoom or via email. I've got enough people now that I might pull the gardeners together next, those who want to do you know, yard work, and like someone posted a question to one of those people. And when I say I've got enough people, I've got like 4 or 5. I don't have hundreds. You know, it's a very small group, maybe 10. Somebody posted a question to somebody, and so I you know, might pull that group together and say, here's a question that came out. People have a sense, hey, let's try to get together via Zoom, in person, whatever way works. So I hope that answers some questions, and if I come up with questions again, I'll let you know.
Vanessa, you mentioned a group in New York that you partner with around technical issues, around tech support.
Yeah, very, very long story short, and I see that Barbara Sullivan is on the call. I guess it was about a year ago, or not quite a year ago, maybe in the fall. Barbara included a article in the Village to Village Network from a group called Dorot, D-O-R-O-T. They've been around since the 80s, because actually I volunteered for them back in 81, 82, or 83. Anyway, they were doing this program called Tech Buddies. And our executive director reached out to them and said we'd be interested. And so Silver Spring Village and a village in Cleveland have been piloting this program with them. We are hoping to maybe have a session at the Village to Village Network conference about it. And I know that Dorot is interested. They've been looking to get some grant money to spread this out beyond just Silver Spring Village and Colorado, but the other villages can also be involved with it. But it really is one-on-one coaching with the members who would like that. And then we also have tech support, people who will help with one-time problems. We had started something like the tech coaching program before the pandemic. We called it Tech Buddies. We used if you know Pam Holland from Tech Moxie, we worked with Pam. She helped us develop the program. I couldn't tell you why, but it did not work as well as the program we're doing with Dorot. It might have to do with the fact that Dorot's program is more structured, and they offer training that our tech coaches have participated in, but this appears to be working a little bit better for us. And stay tuned, because as I said, we might be presenting this together with Colorado and definitely with Dorot at the Village to Village Network, or our executive director, Doug Gaddis, will be sharing it with other people via Wave as time goes on.
Great, thank you. So we'll keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, tech help is huge.
Yeah.
I thought you made some really good points there about reaching out to volunteers personally. I think that a personal phone call would be great. I think that's also something that we need to look at, is cleaning up our volunteer role. So like maybe we need to go out to everyone that we haven't heard from in a while and ask them, like, are you still interested? Like, so we can start with a clean slate at least, and then work from there to kind of re-engage and reach out personally. I love that you're doing volunteer only Zooms in those specific groups. We did one a few months ago for volunteers in general, and it was fun over Zoom. But I think those are a great way to not only create that spirit of community, but get the feedback that you want to hear about from your volunteers, and also that gives them a little bit more buy-in. Like we had an opportunity, we have an all hands meeting. Now we're doing it kind of once a year where everyone comes together and we talk in general about the direction of the organization. Then we have a lot of time for people to give their ideas and feedback. And when people are able to give their ideas and their feedback, it really does give them the buy-in and I think motivates them to participate more. So we had a few volunteers come up with, affinity group things they wanted to do. One wanted to do a game night, and that happened. And I think it is because we gave them the opportunity in a public kind of way to give their feedback and post their ideas, and that really was motivating. So those were really good points. Thank you. Shelley, you have your hand up? Maybe she stepped away.
Shelley, if you're speaking, you're muted to us.
Sorry about that. It was actually an accidental touch of the phone. So, but I'm enjoying listening. I'll just say that our volunteer committee met kind of as the vaccines were kicked in, and we began to be able to offer more services in person, that we compiled a list of folks who were vetted and trained and who had not been active, and the volunteer committee divided up the names and reached out to each one and then reported back to the team. And that actually clarified those that were no longer willing to drive or able to drive, and those that were kind of coming out of the fog of the pandemic. But the bigger thing for us is reaching out to new volunteers and to expand the pie, expand the pool. And sometimes I think we're still learning as we do volunteer trainings. We had a good turnout for one in the late summer, but really we hadn't screened those that came to the training as closely as I think we will now do. I think we're going to do pre-interviews before someone comes to the training. Because it's a lot of time and energy, and there's no sense in wasting it. So I think that's one of our learning we're starting to do more, just putting flyers up in places like the Starbucks in Tacoma, DC, and places that active people who care about the community tend to go. And that added one good volunteer to the pool. But I'd say we're kind of learning from each step, and it's a learning curve that takes some time.
Yeah, that's a great point. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we're also doing volunteer appreciation gatherings, backyard cookout. We did one in October, and we're going to do one again. Our idea is we'll do the training on May 1st, and on the 15th, we'll have an in-person backyard cookout. And just really trying to acknowledge people the one we did in October was to thank people who helped us make it through the pandemic. And now what we want is, if we can train a good group for May 1st, that they would meet other people on May 15th. The question I'd pose to the group, if you don't mind, is I feel like it's easier for people to sign up to help someone if they know them. But a lot of times the folks who need the driving, they're more socially isolated, and they're not coming to social events or even to the Zoom things necessarily. Is there a strategy or a way in which, while maintaining privacy of folks who ask for services, how do we make their personalities and how do we help people to say, oh yeah, I want to help so-and-so, when they haven't quite gotten to know them yet?
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Because you can't give out all that personal information, but when you have a request that is just data, it's not that compelling, right? That is a good point.
But once you drive someone, then you get a feel for that person.
Yeah, but it's the first time. Yeah,
exactly. And getting you to say yes to doing it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, that whole business of how much information to divulge or that you need to give to volunteers for, say, driving someone is it's a little bit of a thorny question, because you want to make sure that the support is there for the person you're providing the ride to. There are some people for whom you might need 2 volunteers to if somebody needs help getting in and out of a car, for example, or needs somebody to accompany them actually into the appointment and make sure they sign in and all of that stuff. So it's something that we've been grappling with a little bit is how much information is needed for really for safety reasons, and then how much is intrusive. So
yeah, and I think Shelley, you made another good point about, you said you're going to do some kind of pre-screening. We don't do that, but what I did just maybe it's more like 6 months ago, is in my first email back to the applicant before the training, I really highlighted some important points in bullet points that I think helped to weed out some extra people. Like I put the age requirement. If you're a driver, you need to be 21 and over. I put everyone needs a background check and a driving record check, just so people know this ahead of time and they're up for it. And then I also, for us, the majority of our requests are for Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So I put in that email on a bullet point, if you don't have availability Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, you're not going to see a lot of driving requests particularly, but other requests as well. So just to give people kind of a heads up on key points before the training.
Self-screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of recently, though, we've had a little bit of a vicious cycle with that, though. We had someone request a nighttime ride and we weren't able to fill it because no one really wants to do nighttime rides. And that's partly because we screen volunteers. We basically say, if you can't do nighttime rides, we're not going to really pay the fee for you to become a driver because, you know, that does cost money and stuff. So it's something we're considering strategic planning, like, should we change that? And also, do we need to advertise more that you're probably maybe not going to be able to have a nighttime ride, you know, when it comes to, you know, membership and stuff, or we're making our volunteers. So it's an interesting thing to think about, whether that could limit us.
It's true.
Larry, I see.
Yeah, I do.
Anyway,
On
so
this,
I'm glad you raised.
yes, thank you. On this issue of being able to, say, using rides as the example, being able to provide rides is one of the services. And when you do not get a volunteer, you know, such as either the nighttime or for some reason, even a daytime driver, what do you do? I mean, do you provide any other taxi service or Uber services, or is it you just simply report that you can't fill their request? How do you handle those issues? And that would be good for any service for that matter. You know, what happens if you don't get a volunteer?
I can talk to that a little bit for Arlington. You know, we do like all of you. We send out the email, wait for someone to respond. As we get closer to the day and someone hasn't responded, we start doing what we call dialing for drivers. And again, I'm sure all of you do something similar. We go to the, you know, always you can call on, always you can count on volunteer. And instead of waiting for them to respond, we reach out to them and say, can you do this? I'll even go so far as to say, you know, there are some instances, and it's not everything, we judge it, where either myself or my colleague Jean will fill a ride. You know, sometimes that speaks to, do I have time available on my calendar? Is it something close by? Or is it for a member who has a really difficult medical situation and we don't want to leave them stranded? Now, that's not to say that we don't have unfilled rides. We do. And we just ask the members to have a plan B when we can't help them. But we do have an escalation in terms of steps that we try to take. And it is about transportation and rides. It's rarely about other things, because other things are always flexible the day it happens. The appointments are the ones that aren't flexible.
Thanks, Wendy. Matt, do you have something to add?
Yes, I wanted to ask you, Wendy, or mention, are you a paid employee or a volunteer at your village?
I'm a paid person.
Well, does your
Yeah, we've covered it. We have
insurance cover having the staff, the paid staff?
Yeah, we cover it in one of two ways. I'm also a volunteer. You know, I've gone through our volunteer vetting process, et cetera. But we also have workers' compensation as another type of insurance. So conceivably, my workers' comp could cover it if my volunteer role didn't cover it.
Okay, well, that we've told anyone that we don't have any full-time employees, but we do have part-time people, and we've told them not to drive because we don't have any clause that ensures people that are being paid by us. So
Yeah,
I was just curious. Thanks.
I just consider that I'm doing it in my volunteer role.
So Patricia, just real fast, sorry to jump in.
Yeah.
I'm also an employee, but I'm part-time. And when I went from being a volunteer, so I am vetted through volunteers as well, to being part-time employee, and this again was about 5-6 years ago, they told me I shouldn't be driving unless it was on my own time. So we have a couple rides right now that are like in the evening or in the morning that I am considering taking, but that's a whole, it's a different situation, but I figured I'd put that out there.
So you would not charge those hours to your village job?
Correct. They would be volunteer hours, except I would have to find out whether or not we could count them as volunteer hours if and when it happens. It hasn't happened in a long time.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Sandy, I see you.
Changing the topic, I wonder what other villages are doing about teenage volunteers. Are you vetting them? Do they have to be with an adult, have some supervision? And what kind of services might they perform on their own?
We had that same issue, and we asked our insurance company, and they gave us language for something that the parents can sign, a waiver, and the kinds of things they might do with snow shoveling, gardening, lifting heavy things, moving things.
And do they have to be vetted? Because you kind of can't vet a kid.
No,
Background
yeah,
check.
you're right. You can't. You also can't. It's hard sometimes with diplomats to vet them. Anyways, but the insurance company wanted the parents to sign a waiver, and they gave us the language. So.
And do they go into the members' homes? Or they just work
We
outside?
haven't had very many, but yeah, if somebody needs something being moved, like a piece of furniture, or we have a victory gardens here, and sometimes people want things carried from their home or their car over to the garden plot, things like that.
So that's interesting. We are just beginning, actually, because some of our members, some of our younger members have children themselves who want, who want the community service credits and so forth for school. And so we're just beginning to look at that. So I appreciate your raising those issues, particularly around insurability and vetting and so forth.
Yeah.
I can speak to what NCCC does. I mean, we've used teenagers, but only never to go into people's homes, usually under the SSL credit thing, leading Halloween parades, doing outdoor stuff only.
That's great. I mean, did you have other things to raise too, or were you just responding to that?
I was just responding. Okay.
Thank you so much. Mary Jo.
Hi. This is both sharing something, but also maybe in the form of a question. Our civic association, twice a year, organizes and then publishes a list of teenagers and specific tasks that they would be willing to do. And the way they do is they send out a call in advance to the community, and the parents sign their kids up. And again, there's about 8 different tasks that are listed on this form, and the parents say, my kid can do this. And then the parent submits that to the person who's making this chart. And then that chart is just published in the newsletter, so that it's not the civic association itself, I believe has been told it doesn't have the burden of saying the civic association is organizing these children who can go to your house. It's more, the parent has said, I want my child's name on this list. I understand the list is only going to the civic association, and it only includes their age, their address. I don't think it's not a street. It's not a full street address. It's just a street so that you know approximately where they are. And so my question is, does that sound like something that gets around the liability issue, where what you've done is you've gone directly to the parents first to say, we are soliciting, or if you would like to have your child be on our helpers list, let us know, and we publish this list. And it only, they never put it online, by the way. They never put it online. It only goes out in physical form with the newsletter. So I don't know, does anything there get around some of the concerns that villages have, or isn't it a good model?
Doesn't sound like a good model to me.
I don't like it. I wouldn't do that. I think you're really opening yourself up. We even had our insurance companies say that we can't be the repository. It's not exactly the same, but some villages had like a closet with tools and things like that people could borrow, but under the auspices of the village. And our insurance company said, don't do that. You can't be responsible. If peer-to-peer through the listserv, people want to borrow each other's things, but you should not be, as the village, recommending service providers. It can be peer-to-peer on the listserv, but the village should not, and put qualifiers if you ever do, but I'm not sure that would stand. I think it's the best practice not to get involved with that kind of stuff.
It's the Civic Association whose president is a lawyer and has been the president for about 15 years now. So maybe I'll let him know that they might want to reconsider.
I think your concern has to be if it's being done in the name of the village and some suable issue comes up.
Yeah.
Can't say, well, we got the name from the Civic Association, they'll come after your village. Not that any have been sued that I know of, but.
Has anybody ever been sued? Does anybody know? For anything?
I have not heard of it.
Hazid has said that as far as she knows, no village has ever been sued, but you don't want to be the first one.
No, no.
Right.
You don't want to go against your insurance.
Right. And the problem with insurance companies is if you do that, then they're going to cancel you, or your
Sure.
premiums are going to, which are ridiculous at this point, will get even higher.
Mhm. Okay. What other topics do we have here that people want to raise? We've
Well, have any of you guys started to think about whether gas prices are going to have an impact on your volunteer drivers?
interesting.
Village Rides recently sent out, for those of us who are partners with the Village Rides program, they sent out a question asking if we're having any trouble with getting drivers because of the gas, and would we want Village Rides to consider providing prepaid gas cards for those drivers. Personally, I mean, I know no driver in North Chevy Chase Connections has expressed a concern, but that is something that Village Rides is considering.
I saw another village, I think on the V2V blog, that talked about making $20, gift cards to their most active drivers, just to offset the cost of increased gasoline.
Nice.
Wendy, I actually got that question from a member who was putting out a ride request and said, I would like to give the volunteer some money because of the fact that gas has raised. And at the time, it was probably a week or two ago, and I said, they don't accept tips. I haven't discussed it at all with our executive director. I work at Silver Spring Village, by the way, with Doug Gaddis. So for those of you who know Doug, so I haven't talked about it with Doug, but it's coming at it from the other way, and I thought that was sort of interesting.
Right.
Mhm.
I would be concerned about it the other way, just because not everybody has the resources to make that contribution. And I wouldn't want people to be treated differently, which is not to say, I don't think the $20 gift, I think depending on how long gas prices remain high, it may become an issue going forward. Now, when I look at some ride requests and you think, oh, this is a short ride, it's not going to be a big deal. But then I look at the time in miles that a volunteer reports, it's 30 miles and 2.5 hours, because it's their house to the volunteer, to the medical appointment, back to the volunteer, back to their house. It's more than you realize.
Is this something that you think that, while you don't want a one-on-one tip from a driver to a rider, would something like telling your members to help defray some of the costs for our drivers, we are collecting donations for gasoline. In other words, so that if people want to, they can make a tax-deductible contribution to you folks, and then you divvy it up to the drivers afterwards. Does that sound helpful or not?
Not really for me.
I feel like for our volunteers, the gas cost is part of what they're part of the gift of their time and the gas money. And I think that, Arlington in particular is so small that it's not a huge outlay of gas money to give someone a ride. So I don't know if that's going to be a huge thing for us, but I do like the $20 gift card, just as maybe we could raffle it off at a volunteer meeting or something, just as a sign of like acknowledging that the gas prices are up and showing drivers that they're valued. I think that would be a nice sign, but I don't know if for us it's going to be too much of a problem.
Yeah, that's another way to show that we value volunteers. I think that's
and that
really
we're paying
the point.
attention.
Yeah.
Also,
Diane, you've got your hand raised again, I think.
I do with just, first of all, I'm taking note of some of these ideas, which I appreciate, including the idea of asking all members and volunteers if they want to make free will offerings, if you will, to a fund to reimburse drivers. I think that's a possibility we might consider. But the idea that I think is important too is, and I realize, gosh, it's been probably 2 years since we've done it here, is to let all the drivers know, in fact, let all the volunteers know that their expenses as volunteers, as driving volunteers or other errands volunteers or whatever, might be tax deductible for them. Now, it's not going to help them a whole lot, because you know that the tax deductibility rate for volunteer activity like this is very much lower than that which government employees get, for example, for driving. It's not the same number of cents per mile, but it might help, and it's worthwhile information, and it does show some respect to volunteers. I think that I realize we should be doing that more often.
Well, it kind of gets back to the earlier theme we were discussing about volunteer engagement, and how do you keep volunteers involved and feeling appreciated, feeling that the work they're doing is valued, and this is one very concrete area for that.
Yeah, and another way to respect their time and what they're giving is to make sure that the requests that go out are very detailed. And like, this is, especially driving, this is where you're going, so people know what they're getting into ahead of time. And then also for us, we remind our volunteers and our members that all requests need to go through the office. So if you are out driving someone to the doctor, you, as a volunteer, if they try to maybe add on another service or another stop, you're allowed to put that right back on office policy and tell them you can't take another service on top of it. So I think like setting the expectations and making them very clear is also a way to respect your volunteers before the service is even started.
Well, it's helpful to the volunteers. It's also it's an important way to keep problems from developing if people have expectations that are just not reasonable. And so I think that's kind of behind a lot of the policies and procedures I think many villages have. So good point, Noel. Larry, again?
Yes, I do have, I have two questions. One is, how do those folks who have service needs make their requests for services? I mean, do they go online? Do they make a phone call? You know, what is the process that your village uses? And the second question is, during this pandemic, what kind of services did your village offer, and what kinds of requests did you get for those services? So it's two questions.
Okay, so for A and B, our members call into the office, and the office volunteer takes their request information down and then sends it out, usually in daily emails. During the pandemic, we scaled way back, especially in the beginning, and we're doing primarily errands because those are the most contactless, safest services where people could still get what they needed to be safe at home, but everyone could be as safe as possible from the virus. And then gradually, as vaccinations came about, we started putting out some more transportation requests. Those are already back at pre-pandemic levels, and we've started to resume our other services. I think the one we haven't resumed yet is home organizing, because that is so much one-on-one time inside a person's home. But yeah, so in the beginning, it was all primarily errands, and now we've worked our way back slowly. Sandy, you have your hand up?
Yeah, going back to what Noelle said about a member seeking to add on a service. We have that problem with several members. And I think what occurred to me we should do, and we've been talking about it, about one specific person today, is when they've signed their quote unquote membership contract, the parameters have been made apparent to them, but that's something that's so easily forgotten, especially for a long-term member. And I think it might be a good idea for our village in its weekly newsletter to just remind people, hey, we're happy to give you services, but please remember to check with the office or before you ask a volunteer directly to do it. It's important, and give them a rationale. It's important for our records. It's important. It's an important way for us to get our funding from DACL or from wherever else. And just to remind them and to reinforce it every few months, perhaps, because again, we get new members constantly. Yeah. So they haven't heard about it.
And it's easy to forget. You're telling new members so much when they sign up that might be something that's easy to forget. And it's also just really tempting. If you're already out, you're so close to the grocery store, can we make another step? So yeah, reminding is really important.
Biden often said, don't tell me what you value, show your religion, I'll tell you.
Yeah, we've got
Catherine, I saw your hand up, and then we can go to Janet.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious about people who have volunteers who are actually taking the office calls. Is that, I guess how does that work in terms of the schedule? Because in our case, it's like I'm a paid part-time person and I'm doing those calls. So I just, in terms of, I'm just curious about that model.
Does anybody have that model?
Yeah, we do. North Chip Chase Connections, we are all volunteer. We have an intake ride coordinator. Her phone number is the one that we post. She's willing to have it go to her home line. And she inputs the data into the Village Ride software, which then automatically notifies the drivers. So we, Village Rides had considered at one point allowing the riders to access the software as well, and decided it would be a bad idea. Just to have the administrators and the trained people access to the software. And this way, it's almost like another touch point, because they get to talk to our intake coordinator and she can fully understand what the needs are, and it's a bit of a social call as well. And we don't have a huge amount. I mean, we don't have the same kind of volume that maybe some of the larger villages have. So for us, that works.
So all of these hands raised by people who have answers to that question as well. Okay, so Mary, and then Diane, and then Diane. And then Janet.
Okay. Pre-pandemic, we had volunteers answering the phones all the time, pretty much. They came in to the office in 4-hour shifts. You know, it'd be once or twice a week. During the pandemic, I guess I would say, not as much. We have a phone system that, you know, can run from an app, so anyone anywhere can answer the phones, and that's how paid staff does it. But we found it was a little harder to do with our members to give access in the app. So right now we only have volunteers answering the phones as much as we're able to have volunteers in the office. And that has ebbed and flowed with the pandemic, as you might imagine. And so that's how we did it. But I think I see Noel saying, you know, recruited for office volunteers who are trained and given regular shifts. That's what we used to have, and what we are hoping that someday the pandemic will allow consistent rescheduling for.
That's great. Diane Wingate, I guess it is.
Okay. I'll be real quick. Yes, we also are an all volunteer village. We don't have a huge amount of telephone traffic. It's just sort of continuous, but not a great flood at a time. We use a free system, Google's Google Phone, basically. We use that for the 6 years we've been in operation. All calls come in, and we can direct, you know, I can make sure they come in on my phone, or I can take them if I'm the coordinator on duty. We have a team of coordinators on duty, so roughly one a day, or some coordinators handle 2 days out of the 7 days of the week. And we simply are the person who answers the phone, and it may be anything from somebody wanting to maybe donate something to a lot of members simply asking for something. So that's the way we handle it. The coordinators are trained volunteers like anybody else, and they get some special training, and they learn on the job too as to how to deal with all the different issues that can come up. It's a very satisfying job. I think most people who do coordinator work really love it.
What village are you?
Cheverly Village.
Thank you.
Diane Smith, Wingate, Maplewood Neighbors Helping Neighbors.
Okay. Well, I can just tag on to Diane that we also use Google Voice, and ours is all volunteer, and there are right now, I guess, 5 people who have volunteered to be the coordinator. And so it comes down to, you know, about 2 months. And we decided that we don't have a whole lot of requests. And so people were saying, well, gee, I don't, you know, we need to have an extended time, like a whole month, because by the time I really kind of learn how to do it, my thing is done. So people are taking a 1 month rotation at a time. And I guess my question is, and it works really well, but again, we don't have that many requests. But the coordinator then, you don't have to, we'd feel like you don't have to answer the phone, because the way the Google system is set up, it goes to our email. And
Right.
so, you know, there's no, when we set up the village, it was, okay, we're going to set it up for people coming and going. And how can this be easily transferred? Because it's all volunteer. And so the phone number is for, you know, the village in Google Voice that's hooked into the email. And so anybody can go, well, anybody who has the password, who is set up as a coordinator, can access and find out what's been going on and where things stand. And we also use the Lots of Helping Hands websites to send messages to that we use the calendar on those to have volunteers go in and sign up. So we can also keep track of if they've, anybody's gone in and said, yes, I'll do it. That also goes to our Google email account. But I'm kind of curious to everybody else of, we haven't really had a pickup of kind of post-pandemic requests. And it seemed like the things that we do neighborly kinds of assistance. And it seems like those kinds of errand, I don't know whether it's the economic level that the neighborhood is, that people have the money in order to pay for delivery services, or and that now you can have your telemedicine, that there aren't really rides needed to go to appointments. And that's something else we thought we were going to be helping with, of getting people set up to do telemedicine. But, you know, people must have figured it out, because we're not getting requests now.
That's great. So in the chat, I've been posting a little bit about what we also use Google Voice, and it's, you know, it's a system that doesn't work smoothly from start to finish, and there is some individuals need to the request coordinators need to follow up often by phone with the people, because the transcriptions aren't necessarily always as clear as they might be. And there's also the question of record keeping. How do we keep track of the hours that people spend, or the time that people spend? We've been talking about this, but Janet Hawley has been an extremely patient woman. And so I want to make sure we get to whatever topic you have, Janet. So.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Bill. We're still, because pandemic didn't really, we really got slowed down in that. Our very fine Sam Williams, who is our vice chair, had us do at the end of February, we did a volunteer meetup. I'm getting some feedback in here. So we did a volunteer meetup. We had about a survey. It's called a survey. We had 21 people sign up. We had a very good discussion, and we learned, you know, there were people that said, well, I really don't want to drive, but, you know, I like to do gardening. So we found there were different things that people wanted to do. We got 3 real recruits out of that to be drivers, and now we're trying to get them to get places to go, because our other problem is we don't have that many people requesting, and we would like to get more members. And that's why I'm sort of stunned that Noel has 300, is it 350 that I heard that you had members in Arlington? Wow. I mean, how did you get to that many? We don't need that many, but we'd really like to have members. Our members do not pay, which I know from some of the other villages they do, but that's my main question. The other question is, we have a lovely brochure. Our brochure has the number on it, and that is our volunteer coordinator, who really answers the phone from 4 to 6, and she gets back right away. And we are with the JCC, the Village Rides, and it's an excellent program, and the volunteers get into that. And we now have just started to do, we did a further training for about 4 of us that are going to be volunteer coordinators. So we have a coordinator who works out of her office after hours, and then those of us that will be backups for her when she has an emergency or she cannot do it. But thank you for this. This is helpful.
Thank you, Janet. Noel, what do we need to do here before we're done?
Let's see.
Summarize everything?
Sure, summarize. No, I think that a lot of good stuff has come up, and it's interesting to see all the common areas where we're all having challenges, right? But I would love to, you know, keep talking about this for many hours, because I feel like there's so many different areas we can get into. But I do think, like, the key things I'm hearing is it's really important to have clear information to your prospective volunteers up front and have those expectations very clear. The training portion is huge, so people know what they're getting into, and that's so that they feel comfortable once they're trained to actually make that first step to take the first service. And then the constant communication, communicating new information, communicating the different kinds of services volunteers can provide, can provide, communicating their impact, and then recognition and acknowledging the services kind of closes that loop. And then it's just a constant, you're constantly engaging and rewarding and hopefully soliciting feedback to make a really strong volunteer core. But I feel like each individual village is going to have its weaknesses and challenge areas and strengths, and that we can really, by continuing these conversations amongst ourselves, help each other fill those in. I've already got some really good ideas. I love the personal calls to new volunteers. I'm hoping I can get my also tiny volunteer committee into that. And just all the great ways of recognizing volunteers that you guys have also brought up. So thank you so much. This has been really great information for us.
I wanted to say a couple of things, if you don't mind. The first is that WAVE hopes to get a new website. It will be time coming, but it may enable us to set up forums by topic. Cool. And clearly there would be a lot of interest in having a forum on this. The other thing I wanted to mention is that on the 18th of April, we're having our quarterly meeting, and the topic is, financial management for villages. And while obviously that may not be of wide interest to quite as many people as this, I hope you'll attend, because we are going to announce our first ever winners of the Founders Award. And you may know that we have a $1,000 prize for one for a village with a budget under $25,000 and another for a village of 25,000 or over. And I can only, it's not a spoiler, but it's a teaser, it's a trailer. There's some excellent projects that came in and excellent winners. And I think you will be very gratified on behalf of villages everywhere to see the kind of energy that's out there. And some of these are very replicable, and I think you'll learn a lot from them. My only deep regret is that it's going to be by Zoom. Of all the occasions when you want to be able to hug someone and shake their hand and say hooray, and maybe even raise a glass of something, this would have been one. And so I'm very sorry that we won't be able to do it. But I do encourage you, go to our website, wavevillages.org, click on meetings, scroll down, go to our old ugly website. Scroll down and you'll see the April 18th meeting, and you can register there. So hope to see you on the 18th. Thank you, Bill and Noel. You have been absolutely superb again. You better watch out. This may be a permanent gig for you.
Well, thank you, Mary Jo, and thank you, Noel.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was
Thanks,
wonderful.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks, Noel.